Welcome back to our podcast series on Global Capability Centres, where we delve into the key elements of building successful Global Capability Centres, or GCCs as some of you may know that they're now called, and the leadership strategies that make them thrive. So I'm Chris Danks, and today we are once again joined by Arvind Chattervedi, former Managing Director and Senior Vice President at CDK Global. With his vast experience building world-class teams and driving business success across multiple countries for companies like AstraZeneca and Capita, Arvind is the perfect expert to discuss today's topic, which is centred around why top talent is drawn to GCCs. Arvind, it's great to have you back again, and thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be back as well, Chris, with you, and thank you for having me. Pleasure being here.
Last time we discussed leadership within GCCs and really focused around that topic. This time, let's focus on something equally important, why top talent is drawn to these GCCs, in the rest of the global capability centres outside leadership. As someone who's managed large, high-performing teams, what do you think makes GCCs attractive to top-tier talent?
I think there are a few things there, Chris. The most important thing, as far as I can see over the years that I've seen people talk about, is the fact that they're representing a big global corporation, essentially. GCCs being part of this parent company, which is usually a major brand somewhere. Even if it's not popular locally within the country where the GCC is located, they are usually big brands that really stand out, and people feel proud that they're associated with them. So that's huge for talented individuals, because it really builds up the career as well over time, quite frankly, being representing these sort of brands. The other one which stands out for me is the nature of work, and many people miss out on that, actually, that you will attract the right sort of people only when you give them the right sort of work. And everybody wants to do meaningful work, right? I mean, you get up in the morning thinking, I'll do something impactful, something meaningful, something that will actually change something somewhere, essentially. And if you don't go away that night thinking, yes, I did that, then probably you wouldn't get up with the bounce in your feet the next morning, quite frankly. And that's what it is. GCCs, because of the fact that they are units of these parent companies, tend to get the kind of work which is really core to the business, which can really make an impact to the customer and the market. And I think that makes a huge difference, and that's why top talent gets attracted as well to that. There is also the part that, GCCs are almost all GCCs now, worth their salt. Okay, there might be a few that are not, but, most GCCs are completely focused on innovation. And I think that presents a great opportunity for this talent to actually develop themselves, and develop their thinking and take on new challenges, which otherwise may not be available to them at all elsewhere. So and then obviously the nuts and bolts stuff, right? The work environment, these are world-class setups, quite frankly, more often than not. They are not like your sweatshops, they're proper, very nice offices, very nice environments that people build. There's obviously the compensation and benefits, second to none. Everybody gets paid really, really well. So that clearly is attractive. A huge focus on learning and development. So without the individual themselves having to worry too much about it, the company worries for them, because, there are various reasons. I mean, GCCs have to keep their people at the leading edge, essentially, of everything. Right? So that goes a long way in terms of growing them professionally as well. So I think several reasons, but for me, these are the top 4 or 5 reasons why people feel so good about going and working for GCCs.
Great, thanks, great insight. Let me ask you almost like the opposite question. So with other, in India, we all know there's a large amount of talent. There's also a large amount of opportunity there, and other options for talent as well. I suppose I'm just curious on the opposite question. Are there any downsides for talent moving into GCCs, just to offer the balanced perspective? Or are there anything that other types of organisations, for example, some of the more traditional outsourcing companies or other options talent may have that they offer that maybe GCCs don't?
I think the one big difference between, say, working for a services company, which is not a GCC of a large corporation, is that you can get variety as a talented individual. You can actually be moved between customers, between industries, between domains, between projects, and between technologies if you're a technologist, essentially. And that really gives you that breadth So, it's a choice between depth and breadth to a great extent, and some people choose depth over breadth, essentially, while others, would like to know, a larger number of things, not necessarily, inch deep and mile wide, but, slightly deeper than an inch deep, but not deep, as in, be absolutely married to a domain or an industry as such. So people of that ilk will find it more attractive to work for a services company because the opportunities might be there for them to actually switch things, switch jobs, switch roles, and get some better life. The other important aspect of a GCC, because it's a unit of the parent company, it works to a very different paradigm in terms of its growth. Services companies, large organizations. If you look at the Indian IT, I'm sitting in India, so I have to speak of the Indian IT services company, right? So, these are prone to actually grow their pyramid all the time. It is the business is about volume of business that they create for themselves, and hence the volume of people that they employ to actually then deliver that business. Unless you're a product company, of course, product companies work to a very different model altogether. But GCCs on the other hand is about maximizing value, leveraging maximum value for the minimum resource that you can deploy. Essentially, that's the philosophy of a GCC. You have to maximize value, which means that this is not an ever-growing organization. It's limited in terms of its scale. So sometimes people find it limiting in terms of the vertical growth in their careers, and that is a problem that people might see as a problem or not, depending on how you think. Because the flip side of that is that the GCCs will get you so close to the customer and the market that you learn so much that you're actually growing, irrespective of whether you're growing in title and levels within the organization or not. You're doing more and more, you're taking more accountability because GCs are structured to be like that. So it depends on how you envision your growth as well, right? So a couple of things that stand out for me. One is the variability and the multiplicity of opportunities that lie within services company, which GCC might not be able to present. And the other is the growing scale of services companies, which allows you that vertical growth that you might be looking for.
And that sparked a thought with me already. Actually, I mean, this is probably the recruiter in me for all these years going back. But if you're a GCC versus let's say you're a very highly skilled niche professional that's maybe got the option of going down the services route or into a GCC. One of the things that maybe the GCCs can think about is, yes, they might not be able to say, well, look, you're going to work across multiple different customers, but really being able to sell the possibility of the different projects and the variety of work that you might be able to do within a GCC to kind of compete with some of the services companies and make sure that you close in on that top tier of talent. Does that seem sensible?
Absolutely, and that is the growth promise that GCCs offer. I mean, I have done that within my GCCs that I have created and run through my life, quite frankly. And that's the big opportunity that you have to put in front of people, quite frankly. That while you might stay within the domain that we operate in, the industry that we operate in, etc., that obviously is the nature of the business, and we are not suddenly going to diversify into doing something completely different. But within this remit, there's so much to be done, and there's so much to be experimented, and there's so much to be tried because the need of the market and the customer is ever changing. You know that, I know that, Chris. We are customers as well as producers, right? And as customers. We are insatiable, to be honest, in terms of what we want to get from our providers, whether they're service providers or product providers. We want something different. We want something new, and I think that drive for the new novel idea creates so many opportunities that really you can keep moving within that same domain, doing so many different things. So, but it is very difficult for people to sometimes envisage that, especially at the entry point or closer to the entry levels into the industry, because they don't have that kind of experience. They don't see where this can go. And that can be a deterrent for some of the youngsters, especially. Once you're a seasoned professional, very, very niche in terms of the skills as we described them essentially, then you start seeing the world through a very different lens altogether. And then you can see these possibilities and you can actually make that happen. And GCCs that don't actually sell that proposition to their to their employees are actually missing an opportunity. So you're absolutely spot on, Chris.
Okay. And also, what I just picked out from that is you kind of need a slightly different employee value proposition or EVP for different levels of talent as well, right?
Absolutely, because you're not going to tell them that you're going to grow vertically all the time. Yeah, because you're not going to scale up to that level. Like I said, the whole model works on the basis that you maximize leverage from the talent that you got. Yeah, and you don't keep throwing talent and adding talent. I mean, it's and when that is the case, you got to give them the reason to believe that they're going to grow professionally, and this is the only way you can do that, quite frankly.
I know that you've led teams across, India, the US, Mexico, and the UK, but let's just take India for example. I know from experience that there is also almost an excess of talent, which is a big part of the reason why people go into places like India. If you took India specifically just for a second, hiring the top talent is a very important thing. But with such a variety of talent available, is it highly competitive, or, to actually attract the best talent, or is it more about selecting the best talent, assessing the best talent, making sure that you bring in the best talent, in reality?
I think it is competitive, no doubt about it, because we got the problem of plenty, as you described, essentially in terms of talent that's available out there. In India, I don't know, I quoted some numbers in the last conversation we had as well, Chris, but roughly, and don't hold me to the number, if you're listening to this podcast, or Chris yourself, please, but about 2 million STEM graduates come out every year, essentially, and a company that sort of feeds the industry with that much talent year on year definitely has a problem of plenty. So, but it's a good problem to have, because it's actually feeding all that need that's rising both in the IT services industry, product industry, as well as the GCCs, if you like. So there is, the demand and supply is literally in balance at the moment. There's no shift of balance on either side. There's not too much supply and less demand, and vice versa, essentially, too much demand and less supply. So I think we are in balance there. What that means is, coming back to your question, you have to be absolutely clear in your mind as to what sort of talent you're looking for, and you're going to go and find that talent. The good news about the current generations of talent, we are looking at a multi-generational workforce right over here. I mean, it spans, like, people like me who've been around for best part of 40 years, and then there are youngsters who just come out of college, essentially, and across these generations, the expectations are different, the demands are different, their life pressures are different. So obviously the mobility is of a different kind, different level altogether. But with the younger generation, that's where most of the talent is coming from. This 2 million per annum being added to the crop of talent that exists out there. That actually gives you a huge opportunity to go and find the right talent from wherever it needs to be found, without necessarily being tied to saying, I'm in this location, so I'm restricted to finding talent only in this location. These people are very mobile. They're very happy to relocate. They're very happy to actually go where good work is, provided you give them good work and good comp and good environment. If as a GCC or even a service provider, you're happy to give all those things, the development, the work culture, the nature of work, the recognition. If you're going to give all of that, these people will travel and go to where work is. So I think to answer your question, it really is not about grappling and fighting for that one good person that exists somewhere in the universe. There are ample of them, but yet you have to be selective. You have to be clear in your mind what you're looking for, and go and find it from wherever you have to, without limiting yourself in terms of the geographies that are involved, essentially.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the key thing that I picked out, or one of the key things that I picked out there, was that you said the talent and the demand is in balance, because we find in there's certain industries where, or countries, or a combination where there's an absolute abundance of talent and fewer roles, although that's becoming increasingly less common now. But there are cases where that happens, and to be brutally honest, I think that the companies could pretty much select the best talent, because they don't need to sell too hard, because ultimately they have an abundance of it. If that market is balanced, that's what changes the dynamic. But it also sounds like, with any good recruitment process, it's also about balancing the assessment to make sure that they're the right cultural fit, that they're the right fit skill-wise and everything else, to make sure that they perform in their role, they stay the course, and all those other factors. So that makes a lot of sense.
Just to point out there, just to make sure that everybody gets that right when they hear this conversation between us, Chris. As a recruiter, I'm sure you understand that the demand is a cyclical process. It goes up and down, right? In the industry, that's always been the case. I mean, we've always seen that sigmoid curve going all the time, essentially, right? And hence the market does shift from an employer's market to an employee's market, and then there is a period where it's completely balanced. So that shift keeps happening. No two ways about it. There are times when there's more demand than supply, and it becomes an employee's market, and there are times when there's less demand, more supply, and that becomes an employer's market. So those variations in the recruitment market keep happening. No two ways about it. But if you look at it over a period of time, my assessment is fairly balanced. So you'll find the right talent at the right price from wherever you go and you want to get it from, as long as you're looking for what you're looking for, what you really want, essentially.
Just taking a step back for a second, I mentioned earlier that you've led teams across India, the US, Mexico, and the UK. When it comes to GCCs, sort of in general terms, what would you say are some of the key differences between running a GCC in all of those different, in different locations?
I think the work culture is the one that stands out straight away. Different regions of the world think differently of how work has to be done, essentially. The priorities are very different. Life's priorities are very different in each of these regions, essentially. And that doesn't mean that one region does better than the other in terms of the work they deliver to you, but they just do it differently. And you need to be able to understand that as a leader if you're going to lead GCCs across multiple regions. And you got to, adapt your entire work environment to work to those styles, essentially, that exist. Yeah. Now, the fun happens when these different regions have to work together because they have different work cultures. Some are more labor driven, some are more demanding, some are less excitable when it comes to work. All of those things are true, right? And I'm doing a generalization across regions. This is about individuals within the same region as well. You find all kinds, as they say, right? But generally speaking, you see that dynamic play out, essentially. Where one region looks at work in a different light from another region, and then you can see a little misstep coming through between the two every now and again. You got to balance that out, and you got to make sure that people are culturally aware. They understand that these are different ways of looking at life, and it's all right. There's nothing right or wrong or good or bad about it. It's just what it is. And despite that, collectively as a team, you got to deliver what you got to deliver. And I think that's why what becomes most important in those scenarios, according to me, is how well understood are those goals across the team that might span regions. The goals that they need to deliver to, shared goals, essentially. And how well are they actually tuned into those goals? How close are those goals to the actual mission of the business that they represent? Yeah. And hence how, what sort of significance these individuals sitting in different parts of the world accord to the work that they're doing, essentially. All of those three things really, really become very, very important when you start looking at teams that are, across regions of the world, across cultures, and yet have to come together to deliver what they need to deliver. I think, that understanding that there will be differences, even from the point you start setting up the teams, is extremely important. And then, how you define your workflows, what tooling do you put in place, what cultural awareness programs do you put in place, how do you actually make sure that while they might, naturally get out of step, you can bring them back into step through your work processes. All of that becomes extremely important.
Have you got any fun kind of anecdotal cultural differences that you've come up against? I can certainly share one of my experiences.
Yeah, I think without taking names of the regions, I don't want to name and shame anybody in particular, but between one region and the other, because of the level of urgency that people associate with delivering what they need to deliver. We had this huge issue where one region kept putting everything to say, this can't be done tomorrow, so let's do it tomorrow. Why do I have to sit tonight and get this done because it's okay to be done tomorrow. And the other region was like, if we can get it done today, then tomorrow we can pick up something else. We have to move forward on the scope of work that we need to deliver. And I think if I'd given the names of the regions, I think the fun part of it would have become more evident. I would have used some of the local language as well and the words from the local language, but I don't want to do that really. But I think it became very clear very quickly that there was a level of frustration that was building up on both sides because of that, and ultimately after letting the team try and solve it for themselves. Frankly, my next in command in that particular part of the business had to step in and say, "Hey guys, let's blow the whistle. Let's call it quits for a bit. Let's talk about how we're going to actually get over this and make sure that we don't get into these situations again." So neither side actually wanted to do any different from make sure that the delivery happens. But it's just the way people think about what work means to them and how much significance they accord to that in their overall scheme of life, if you like, brings about the difference essentially. So I don't know whether it was fun or not, but that was the one that, since you put me on the spot, that's the one that came to mind. I remember that distinctly. I even remember the conversation that happened.
I totally did put you on the spot there, so yeah, apologies for that. But I think, I've come across lots of fun ones, or not. I say fun, I mean like ones. What I mean by that is anecdotal things that come up you don't expect to come up. So one of the ones I was told about once was another region, which I'll also keep nameless. This organisation decided to move into this other region, but they didn't know when they moved into this region that most of the talent preferred to work night shifts, which is obviously a little bit strange. And the reason for that, which some people might already have guessed, is because the traffic is so bad in this particular region that it literally shaves hours off their days if they work at night and actually go into the office as opposed to the daytime, which significantly shifted the time zones that most employees wanted to work and therefore support. So that was one element. Another one that springs to mind was, this wasn't actually specifically in a GCC, but there was one case where they learned that the internet was so unreliable in this particular area that they issued all employees with data SIM cards, so that if their Wi-Fi dropped out when they were working remotely in parts, that they had a backup plan, so didn't drop off. There's definitely some interesting things that can pop up, and that you just don't see coming if you don't know the region. So certainly keeps you on your toes, I think, at times.
Absolutely, and you said it right. Knowing the region, it's extremely important. I mean, when people look at themselves as GCC leaders, and sometimes it's a misnomer because you're really running one center in one location and that's about it. But when you're a true GCC leader whose job is to run centers across various regions, your depth of understanding of each region that comes under in your remit essentially is extremely important. Exactly the point that you said, Chris. That otherwise it becomes just impossible to try and second guess what's coming next at you, and before you know, everything falls apart.
Well, let's build on the topic of culture and attraction, I guess, sort of intertwined. Do different, you touched on this a little bit earlier. Different talent in different regions, do they have different motivators for their work, their career, and what might attract, what might attract one person for one role in one country? Would it be the same things that attracts them to the same role in another country, or would it be different?
So there's a lowest common denominator. How well am I getting paid in the context of the market that I belong in? That's the lowest common denominator. Everybody gets either upset about it or very happy about it, essentially. Nobody gets ever too happy about it. Let's be clear on that also. But yeah, they could get upset about it if that's not set right. So, and the measures are different because if you're in one market versus the other, the market dynamics are different. The comp levels are different. The market expectations are different. So but irrespective of that, in comparison with the market expectation, where do I stand? How am I being compensated for what I bring to the table? And that's quite frankly the lowest common denominator, which actually works across regions. There's no two ways about it. But then once you get past that, the brass tacks essentially, you start looking at differences straight away. For instance, in India. And I'm going to name regions now. In India, I think not that the other regions don't focus on it too much, but in India, talent will always look at how are you preparing me for my next job? How much competitive edge are you building in me in terms of my skills, in terms of my professional growth, etc. That's very, very important to them because going back to the question that you asked earlier, I mean, we got the problem of plenty, no two ways about it in a day, but equally the demand's there as well. So they want to go and find the next best job that they can get, essentially. And how are you as an employer preparing me for it is a very important part of it. And that also, within that also comes in what is the nature of work you're making me do? Am I doing some grunt work on the side, which is irrelevant to the business, or am I doing something mainstream? I mean, am I doing something which is really, really impactful? Because then it really strengthens my CV, simple as that. Now that part may be common again across the base, but in certain regions that I've worked in, people are not that fussed about the nature of work just as yet. They might get there as those markets develop, as GCC locations, if you like. But right now, right here, they're more fussed about the fact that I've got a job and I'm working for a company that's a good name in the market. That's got a good name in the market. It's a good brand, and I'm being paid well, and that's good enough for me essentially. In some other countries, it's very, very important to make sure that you've got the right benefits associated with it. You know that, I know that. I mean, if you don't have the right kind of health benefits, people won't come and work for you, right? And that is true because it's important. So your benefit structure, I was talking of comp earlier, but your benefit structure is very variable from one country to another, and you got to get it right because and in some countries, people are more focused on that than others. I had a situation where one of my team members was, on my say so, accepted the offer, but was very irate for a very long time because the HR hadn't turned around and released all his benefits, essentially, made those benefits available to him. Yeah, and he was fully justified because those benefits are, quite frankly, life-saving in that particular region of the world. Essentially, he needs to have that. He needs to have his family covered, himself covered. So I think it was fully justified. The same would have happened in India. A person would have been, mildly upset about it that HR are not acting fast enough, but wouldn't have been, feeling that people are being unjust to them essentially. So the difference in terms of level of disruption of the mind that it causes, the same thing, right? So I think it is literally different strokes for different folks. You've got to think in that terms. You can't take one carte blanche approach and say every region will do the same thing and everything will be fine. Of course, your policy framework remains the same. The underlying foundational framework remains the same, which is driven from your parent company. But then on top of it, you could start building as to what are the things that make talent think well of you as an employer versus not in this particular region versus any other region. And then you got to start devising, your local policies and your strategies around talent attraction, talent retention, etc., keeping that in mind. And yes, no two regions, people's expectations are the same. I mean, I can go on this, but I'll stop there. Hopefully it answers the question.
No, it's great. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of kind of subtopics around this. Although one I just wanted to pick up on was how important is work-life balance?
Oh, hugely important. And I think I've seen the shifting sands on that even in places like India, where traditionally work has been life for most people, quite frankly. But with the newer generation, the younger generation, Gen Z, etc. I'm seeing a huge, recognition of the fact that there has to be a strong, good harmony between your work life and your life, personal life, essentially. Outside of work life, whatever you want to call it. So there's that huge, push towards that, and I firmly believe that one thing that I've always told my leaders, my teams. If we as leaders can take away everything else that employees can be concerned about, then you can be sure that your employee will then dedicate themselves to actually, worry about what the customer will be concerned about, and the market will be concerned, and will solve it for you, essentially. If they're worried about 100 other things that you've not taken care of, then obviously they're distracted and they're not going to be able to do the best job they can. So as to tell my leaders, I have always told my leaders, I still do, your job is to take away every other pain from the employees, and that's constitutes the work-life balance for me. Making sure that, everything that is of value to them in their personal lives, you are valuing that and making sure that as an employer, you're doing what you need to do, ensure that they can do the best job of it, essentially, to work. So, and that's very important for the customer, for the employees, sorry. And employees, the engagement will go up. The engagement goes up, the productivity will go. They'll be less distracted, as I said earlier. They'll be less stressed, and their work quality will go up. Everything gets positive, quite frankly. So there's huge amount of return for the employer if they just take care of the work-life balance, making sure that the employee is not distracted by any of that. And to do that, it's not very difficult. I mean, obviously, I refer to a multi-generational workforce that we work with at GCCs, generally speaking, and every industry now, actually. But, speaking specifically of GCCs, you got to be thinking, again, different strokes for different folks, like I said earlier, right? You got to be thinking of that diverse workforce. What's important to them? What does work-life balance mean to them? And you got to be providing benefits that are appropriate for that generation. You can't say that these are the benefits, take it or leave it. That doesn't work. You got to be thinking about, okay, for this generation, this is what's important because they are in that age group. And that means their family would be structured like this. They'll be at that level of maturity, stage of their lives, etc., etc. So you got to do something for them. Yeah. So those kind of things. You got to be one of the big frustrations that builds up in these remote locations. GCCs are remotely located units, right? One of the things that builds up, I've seen as frustration, is the fact that they have to keep waiting for instructions or ratification of what they've done from the parent location. Yeah, if that sort of those kind of work practices are in place, it can be pretty frustrating and actually can be very disruptive to work-life balance, essentially. So one of the things that I've also focused on always is how much autonomy can I build for my GCC teams? How much can they work independently, autonomously, deliver what they're supposed to deliver without having to rely on any other external location, which might be, several time zones away and hence might naturally be disruptive in that sense. Okay. And I think, generally speaking, you need to have framework where, I mean, I've run 24/7 centers, Chris. I mean, my GCCs have been 24/7 centers, all of them. And, you got to have very, clear boundaries decided within which the employees are expected to operate. The shifts that you define should be very clear. People should be given the flexibility of choosing a shift. Not all the time. You can't do that, otherwise you'll not be able to run the business. But, as and when possible. And as an exception, if somebody needs to move shifts, yeah, you should consider that. Absolutely. You can't be saying that, Arvind, you're going to work only the graveyard shift and no other shift. That doesn't work for anyone, quite frankly. So I think that needs to, and then there have to be policies which offer the flexibilities. There are, personal exigencies that demand that people work from home, work remotely. The policy framework should allow that. So these are simple things. It's not very difficult, but the gains for the employers are huge. It's I find it strange that people actually, do pretty poorly on that sometimes and miss out on those gains that they can avail, actually, if they did the right thing for the employees.
Interesting. You touched on a couple of things there. One thing that I picked up earlier in your comment was around the fact that, things have changed in India, you were referring to culturally, where maybe work-life balance wasn't so important before, work is life culture. That's now changing, at least in the Gen Z kind of category of the generations now. That I think it's the first time in history any leaders had to manage 5 generations of employees all at the same time, right? That's never happened before. But what's interesting, and this is something I picked up, if I take I'll take a country like Poland, for example. I think it's really important that people keep very close to the changing shifts in each country and don't assume that it's the same culture or the same things drive people as they did last year or the year before. Because if I take Poland as an example, we still get approached by people who assume that Poland is a very low cost location. And because, they know it's part of Eastern Europe and maybe historically 10, 15 years ago, it was absolute, it was the case. Whereas now it's actually, almost as expensive, if not as expensive as the UK, Germany, France in Europe. And actually people are still going there very much, but for different reasons. They're going there for the very top tier of talent, but cost is obviously less of a consideration, for example, because there are definitely lower cost countries. And as I said, people still come to us, inquiring about recruitment there and setting up a team there or a GCC there. And there's often these assumptions. So, and I think given the pace of the world now, do you agree that it's important people keep so close to this? Because, I've been guilty myself of making some assumptions in different countries. And then when you start reconnecting with that country, you realize actually things have changed,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's extremely important that you keep seeing how these things are changing over time. Quite frankly, I'll give you a simple example. You gave the example of Poland, and I'm aware of that because I did some work with Poland when I used to live in the UK, actually, for one of my previous employers, essentially. But coming to India, since that's where I am right now. I mean, there was a time when the cost ratio was 1:5 as compared to any big Western economy, whether it was UK or US or whatever. Today it is depending on which level of talent you're looking at, it could be 1:2 or 1:3 at best. Even at the lowest level, and people come with a wrong expectation of seeing 1:5. They do business cases with the assumption that it is still 1:5, and then the jaws drop when they see the costs, essentially.
Yeah.
But you have to, the reality check has to be done, and we are talking cost, and that's just one dimension of it. Every dimension, it's changing, it's evolving, and rightly so, because when it used to be 1:5 in India, carrying on with that example, you came here for grunt work. You came here for cost arbitrage. That's what you came here for. Okay. Today you're coming because you got skills, you got talent. You're coming here for talent arbitrage. You want to do some things differently, using the highest quality talent, but at a relatively lower cost. The proposition has changed. That statement that I've just made just talks about the change in proposition itself, essentially. So, I think that awareness that you talk about, Chris, is so important. And it's so, unfortunately, so lost across the base that people come and they always have these jaw-dropping moments where they say, oops, I thought it was this much, and where are we now? Look. So, yeah, no, absolutely. Concur with you.
Just touching on cost as well, costs change, right? So I know cost isn't the only factor, as you've rightly said. There's many, many factors, including work-life balance and cultural changes and all these other things. But also there's an assumption that, if I go into a particular location, because the cost difference is that there's still a big difference. Even if I go there for talent, of course, that's going to shift over time. So that's another thing I guess people need to think about. What does the future look like when it comes to attracting top talent? If you had a crystal ball and you're looking a few years ahead, what do you think will attract the Gen Z, the Gen Z, or even future generations as well?
Yeah, I think you got to look at, before you start doing the crystal ball gazing for what would Gen Z or the future generations want to attract them. Got to start looking at how the shape of the industry is going to change, right? How the shape of the world and businesses, how they're going to change. And with so much happening around the whole automation, AI, digitalization, cloud computing, the world has become about that, quite frankly, right? Whatever industry your business belongs to, at the end of the day, these paradigms still apply to you, right? And if you have not already adopted them, then you're already behind the curve, quite frankly, because sooner rather than later you'll be pushed into it if you've not embraced it, essentially, and then you'll be working against time, and the world essentially sitting out there. Your customers, your markets will start expecting that value that these create, which you'll not be able to deliver, and you'll be at loss, to be honest. So I think there's a broad recognition across all industries that that's where the world is heading. That's what the world is going to be about. It's going to be about intelligent automation. It's going to be about AI. It's going to be about data science. It's going to be about cloud computing, and that's where it's heading. And now come back to the talent question. So obviously the nature of talent is changing to be able to provide that kind of skill. Where I speak for myself, where I started, manual skills were very important. Physical skills were very important. Today they are not. Today technological skills take the trump, essentially. They trump the manual skills any day. If you're well versed with technologies, tools, you're more likely to be in gainful employment than if you just knew how the process worked, essentially. However, there's value to knowing the process still. Because, if you don't understand how the base process of the industry works, then how are you going to apply those technology and tools that you've skilled yourself up in, essentially? So I think the nature of talent thereby is going to be, shifting towards more technologically skilled people. Yeah. People with more cognitive skills as opposed to physical and manual skills, essentially. All of that shift is going to happen. But there is going to be a continued need for people who understand the base process, the base workflow, etc., the way that industry has worked traditionally, so that then the people who know the technology can apply it to the process and make the best of it, essentially adapt the technology to actually deliver the best of the process, quite frankly. So there's going to be a mix of that. So the multi-generational nature of the workforce is not going to disappear, according to me. It's going to continue because there will be value seen in those people who understand the industry as it was, essentially. But more and more the shift is going to happen to the technological skills, which means if you're an employer, you'll have to make certain that for retention of those very important people who understand your business, how are you going to retain them? How are you going to upskill them? How are you going to make them skilled enough to stand up to this new generation of high-tech talent that you're bringing in? Work with them, be able to speak the language and deliver the adoption of the technology and tool that you're looking at, essentially, as a business. So there'll be a huge amount of retention effort required on that side, upskilling effort required on that side, retraining, etc. Obviously, there will be some shift in terms of the percentage of people knowing one or the other. Yeah. But then there'll be a lot of demand for those people who understand these new technological paradigms, essentially, and bringing them in. Huge competition out there for them, for people who with those skills. Yeah. And that would mean, you would have to think of various strategies in terms of, you might not get always the best talent that you want. Going back to the question you asked about 3 questions back, the competition, that might become more and more evident at that point in time, because there'll be a certain set of skills which will be more sought after. Yeah. And that means you'll have to look at various other means of acquiring that skill or leveraging that skill. More, I don't know, contract workforce, temporary workforce, may to leverage the specialist skills, tie-ups with your, startups and other service providers. All of those things will start happening for GCCs to be able to actually compete for that talent as well, essentially. So I think the demand is going to increase on the technological side. To summarize the answer to the question that you asked specifically, that skill shift is definitely going to happen, and that means because it will be a niche set of skills, and while the availability will continue to get better, there will be times when there will be bottlenecks around that, and that would mean that different kinds of hybrid work models will have to be brought into place to actually make sure that work still happens. That's my thought. Crystal ball gazing might be completely wrong. Don't hold me to it. If the future doesn't pan out that way, please.
Yeah, there's a lot changing in the world at the moment, so I think there's a lot of variables, but I mean, it makes sense. What you're saying really is that, at the moment there's this kind of balance of talent and it does ebb and flow, but you've also got that added complexity where you've got, advancements, for example, in AI and different skill sets that are needed in AI, which I know is talked about pretty much every day at the moment, and how that's going to create positions for only a very small amount of people possess, even in some of these locations where there's an abundance of talent generally. I think it just goes back to showing that, your employee value proposition is always going to be important, whatever happens, basically, in whatever location that you're hiring in.
Absolutely, Chris. Completely agree with that. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're coming towards the end of time now. So I wondered, once again, Arvind, if you would mind sharing some of your final thoughts, maybe 2 or 3 key takeaways that our listeners and people watching this podcast today can take away.
Certainly, Chris. I think I'll reiterate what I said probably up front in this program. Quite frankly, the one thing that employers have to remember is that people come and work for them because they want to perform on the global stage, and do meaningful work and make sure that they're making an impact and are being challenged and being able to deliver high quality work, essentially. That's why they come and work for you. Never forget that would be my request to anybody who is listening, essentially. Because I think if you get that right, more often than not, you'll get the right talent through the doors, for sure. Okay. That's number one. I think, you touched upon it, I've touched upon it, employer brand becomes extremely important. And the nature of work is very much part of employer brand. But, the employer value proposition, your mission, your values, remember that GCCs actually imbibe the values of the parent company. So, you might want to rethink your values as a parent company if you're building a GCC as well. So, these are not, outsourced partners. These are your people sitting in a different location. That's all they are. So, so think about how all of that translates into the minds of the talent that you're looking to attract and retain within your GCCs. Obviously, like I said, the brass tacks, your compensation, your benefits, your work culture, all of that is extremely important. Don't underestimate the value of the workplace setup at all. I know, when you're going in with the mindset of, let me try this out for a bit, let me dip my toes in the water and see how it feels, and then I'll do something more. Well, your brand is being evaluated from the moment you stepped into that location. So make sure that even if you're dipping your toes and you're stating that intent very clearly and the long-term vision, in case everything goes well, you find that the temperature of the water is good enough for you and you're going to grow over there. Make that statement upfront. Be very clear on that. And I think that will start, delivering a message to the market, to the talent market, and the right talent will start looking at you with interest.
Great, Arvind. That's fantastic. And I just want to say thanks very much for joining us again today. You've taken a lot of time out to jump on these podcasts and share your experience and insights. So really appreciate that. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and do share it with others, as well as we're building out far more content around this particular topic and other topics around international expansion and other themes as well. At the Leadership Collective, our mission is to help business leaders with the tools and community support they need to succeed on their journeys when they're moving cross borders internationally. So be sure to subscribe to our podcast, share with your network, and do come and join us in the Leadership Collective community. Also, the website is theleadershipcollective.global. You can sign up there and also get in touch with us. And if you'd like to get in touch with Arvind as well, please do reach out. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you as well. So thanks very much, Arvind. Really appreciate you joining again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Chris. Likewise.